So I'm super excited tonight to have Kaleo Manuel here with us. He's a good friend that I've known for a very long time and also serves currently as the Deputy Director for the Commission on Water Resource Management. In the Hawaiian Civic Club movement, we often talk about water and how important it is, but we don't always know really how the policy and the law behind how we manage our water resources here in Hawaii really works. So we're very fortunate to have Kaleo, who really is responsible for leading the agency that manages those resources and manages our water code, to come share with us how that all works. In the past, we've heard from Arthur Ayu from Board of Water Supply, and we learned a little bit about their kuleana, and we'll hear tonight from Kaleo. So, and I also want to mention that Kaleo is a member of the Hawaiian Civic Club of Ka'u, and at the 2022 convention in Seattle, the association adopted a resolution calling on the incoming administration and Governor Green to reappoint Kaleo to this role. So we are glad that that happened. We got our wish. And with that, I will turn it over to Kaleo. Go ahead.
Hey, aloha, everyone. Mahalo, Dre, for the introduction and for having me. I apologize, but I am at the airport waiting to pick up my other half. So I'm going to be doing this in transit, and I apologize for the timing of it. Delayed flights are never helpful. So yeah, mahalo for the introduction. Usually when I talk about water and I'm in this space, I don't know if this is a two-way thing, but I'm hoping that I can ask on all of you that are here is just so that way I understand who's in the room and how better to connect with everybody. One of the things I've been doing recently in these types of conversations about water and the water code and our kuleana is to start off kind of with an icebreaker. And it's really just real simple, just your name and then where you're from. And then the cue or the prompt that I use is, what's your water story? And it's meant to be broad and you interpret it how you want. So it would be great if I could hear from you folks on the call, your name, where you're from, and what's your water story, because then it helps provide me with context on how I can maybe bring examples into the conversation and as we talk about the water code. So I'll start. So I'm Kaleo Manuel. My ohana comes from Waiʻohinu Ka'u, my Hawaiian side of ohana. My Japanese side of ohana comes from Kaimuki, Oahu. I was born and raised on the Big Island, grew up in Volcano, graduated from Waikiki High School, and then made my way to Oahu and have been here since. I got my undergrad in Hawaiian studies and my master's in planning, and then fell into water. But my water story is I fell into it related to policy and planning. But what I just remember growing up on catchment and living off a catchment all my life. And so I have this connection and relationship with water that's, about conservation and understanding that it's limited, right? And so that's my relationship to water, my water story. And then fast forward to now, being in this position to be able to be one of the caretakers and stewards of water resources in the state is really, really important to me. So I'll stop there and I'll pause and look forward to hearing other people's water stories, if that's cool. And maybe we'll start with Dre first, if I can kick it off to you.
Sure. So I'm Drea Kalili. I'm the current president of Elizabeth Kahanu Hawaiian Civic Club. I'm from Pearl City. And I don't know that I have a water story other than I think I fall in the bucket of people who take it for granted and have always had access to, good quality, good tasting water. And I don't much more than that, really just here to learn more about what we can do to support policy that, pushes in the direction of making sure we always have it, right? I think it's a good thing, right? That people take it for granted. That means, things are being done right, correctly. And then I know some of our members might be like driving or just otherwise occupied. So whoever else wants to jump in, maybe Max next. I'll pass the baton.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Dre. So again, my name is Kahanu Olaf Max Lindsay, from East Honolulu. Lindsay with family roots going to Maui up to Waimea, Hawaii Island. I guess my water story, I mean, besides just having all the parables of water connected to my name, is uh, there's a number of things, but most recently in my work in land development and affordable housing development, my company has come into possession of a private well in Waialua, Oahu, and you know the Commission on Water Resource Management. You guys are a huge part of keeping our water flowing and making sure we're following all the rules to keep that water safe.
Mahalo.
And then
Is anybody?
like Cedric
go
or
ahead.
Tulu, do you want to jump in?
I can go. So my name is Tulu Marie Kahale Vaimana. I am from Kalihi. I lived in Waimanalo for about 10 years and then now moved to Kaka'ako. I think a big part for me is my middle name is Kahalevai. For a long time, my mother and I had interpreted as a reservoir, as fresh water, feeding the public, feeding others, being a resource to people. So that's how I connect with it. I know it has different interpretations for different people, but that's how I started looking into fresh water, and water's always been my safe space. So that's how I got into it.
Mahalo nui. That's so awesome.
Hi, aloha, Kaleo. Cedric Duarte here. Good to hear you. Cedric from Manoa, currently living in Ewa Beach, Honolulu, and I don't have a water story per se, but I am just a seeker of greater understanding. So you know that I worked recently for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and during that time, I got really, as a Tauni Hawaiian, I was really introduced to the struggles of access to water on the neighbor islands, and it was very eye-opening for me, and really started me on this effort to gain a greater understanding. And anytime there's an opportunity to learn, I'm here for it.
Mahalo. Is that everybody? Sorry, I'm on my
Yeah,
phone.
I think so.
Okay, let me try and turn on my camera so I can talk. Okay, I'm not driving, I promise. I'm passenger now. So yeah, let's just talk about the Water Commission a little bit. So, the Water Commission is the result of our 1978 Constitution Convention, where, the public, including Native Hawaiians, recognize that water is something that can't be owned, right? It's a public trust resource. And that's also building on this concept from, our traditional water management thinking and our ways of viewing water, as Kawaya Kane, as Max talked about, that water isn't something that you can own, but something that you manage, that we're stewards of, right? And if we honor it like an akua, like something that needs to be revered, then we need to protect it, and everyone should benefit from that. So based on the Constitutional Convention, it highlighted water as a public trust, re-emphasized that was the case, and called for the establishment or creation of the State Water Code. So that State Water Code is memorialized in Chapter 174C, HRS. You can look at that, but that was written, it called for the creation of the Water Code. It took about 9 years to write. So in 1987, 1988, the Water Code was adopted, basically promulgated. And that established the Commission on Water Resource Management, which I'm currently the deputy to. So the commission is like most people hear about the Board of Land and Natural Resources that manages our water, our natural and cultural resources throughout the state. Well, the commission has a similar role, but its primary kuleana is to manage and protect water resources throughout the state for current and future generations. And that body is made up of 7 members. It's also the chair or the director of DLNR, or the Board of Land and Natural Resources, and that's an ex officio, And then the other state representative or state ex officio is the director of the Department of Health, and primarily to oversee and be part of the water quality conversation. So those are the two state ex officios. The other 5 seats are held by they're held by just at-large members. There's no geographic requirements. The only thing that is required is that one of those 5 must have substantial experience related to traditional Native Hawaiian water management. And so that's a great thing, right, for our Native Hawaiian communities, to know that there must have that kind of understanding and presence on this body. And so you can check out our website to see who's the current commissioners, but that's just generally our body, our policy making body, our decision making body. And so, you know, with such a big task statewide to develop managed water resources, well, the how we do it. So I try to keep it simple, and we say it's a balance, right? One is we protect the resource, and how we protect it is we monitor it, and we have to collect data on it. You can't manage what you don't know. So we're consistently doing research. We're consistently doing hydrologic studies. We're measuring stream flow throughout the state in order to better understand what do our water resources look like. So that's the protection side. And then we have the use, right? So the water code talks about balancing protection and then water use, because we need to use it. And so we work with the counties. County departments of water supply was mentioned. They're one of the many users in the state. Max talked about a private well that he has and acquired in Waialua. So there are private wells that are owned by individuals. So those are all water resources that fall under the jurisdiction of the Water Commission. The other thing to think about, we're technically a regulatory agency, administratively attached to DLNR, but there's 2 kind of primary ways we go be managing the protection of the resource and the use. So one is long-term, right? We need to understand what does our water future look like, so that way we can manage to that or for that. And so we have what we call as the Hawaii Water Plan. So the Hawaii Water Plan lays out this long-term vision of how we're going to manage and protect our water resources related to water quality, related to what kind of projects are coming on board that are going to need water in the future. It looks at agricultural water demand, and then obviously includes the counties who play a critical role in development and use of water resources. So there's the long-term perspective that we are in charge of developing and managing. And then there's also the regulatory permitting side, where we issue and give permits. And so anytime you're going to develop a well in the state, you need to get a well and pump installation permit. So those are 2 permits that we issue in our agency. And that's primarily to make sure that when wells are drilled, that they're designed correctly, that they're not over pumping our aquifer and creating salting that happens when you become like straws straight into our freshwater resources that Dre had talked about too. Like, we want to make sure that it's clean and that it's not contaminated. And so we manage those well construction and pump installation permits. And then there are types of wells that are excluded from that, and that's like anytime geothermal wells are developed, those are permitted through DLNR's engineering branch. And then anytime there's like underground storage tank or landfill types of monitoring wells, those are permitted through the Department of Health, through their environmental program. So most of any other well than that, it comes in and gets permitted through the Water Commission. And then on the surface water side, or streams or springs, anytime you're going to divert water from a stream, you need a stream diversion works permit from the Water Commission. And then if you're going to do anything in the stream channel, like you're going to harden a stream bank, or you're going to dig out and dredge a stream, any type of that work needs to get a stream channel alteration permit from the Water Commission. So that's the groundwater and surface water permits that we manage and administer. And then there's a 5th one, which is the water use permit. And a water use permit is only required in water management areas. Those areas are identified as areas basically that need oversight or additional oversight and management by the Water Commission. And that could be for various reasons, but a lot of it has to do with water resources in that area have the potential to be threatened and endangered, and therefore we need to step in as a state to make sure that how water is used, how water is allocated, the actual allocation of water is done in a way that's reasonable and beneficial. And that's a term that you'll hear in water law, reasonable and beneficial. Basically, you cannot be kapulu, you cannot waste water, you cannot run systems that are leaky. It's holding ourselves as stewards of water resources to higher standards. And so that water use permit is applicable in groundwater or surface water management area. So one of those that we just designated was in Lahaina in West Maui, where we're going to be going through water use permitting processes moving forward. I guess specific to this Civic Club, the entire island of Oahu is designated as a groundwater management area, except for the Waianaimoku. So anytime you're going to use water, whether it's diverting water from a stream or even using water from a well or a groundwater resource, you're supposed to get a water use permit from the Water Commission. The only time you don't need to get a water use permit is if you're what they call a domestic use of water, which is usually for your individual use and consumption. Once you start using that water and then transmitting it or moving it around to other users, then you're kind of going beyond the intent or at least context of what's currently described as domestic. So that's the commission in a nutshell. So we have both short-term and long-term protection and use management that we oversee and regulate throughout the state, and just mostly permitting, a lot of permitting actually, and then planning, right? Which is my background, and that's how I kind of got into this water field, which is around water policy and water planning. How do we project and manage our resources so we'll have water available now and in the future? I will stop there because that was a quick download of the Water Commission and our kuleana. There's a lot of other intricacies, but I wanted to make sure that we can take questions, or if there's any thoughts or feedback right away, then we can jump into it.
Awesome, thank you. Members, any questions at this point? If you have a question, just unmute and ask. And if not, then I have questions. So, I know you talked about, the interplay with the Department of Health, and I presume it's Clean Water Branch and the county departments of water supply, or the Board of Water Supply, like we have for City and County of Honolulu, and then your kuleana. And so I think a lot of times our members, right, blur the lines between who's responsible for what. And so over the years, the association has adopted resolutions calling for certain actions to be taken. And I think we are asking the wrong actors. So for example, in 2018, there was a resolution entitled calling for all Hawaii state government leaders to ensure the restoration of all East Maui streams to benefit the long-term stewardship of East Maui forests and providing enough water to meet its primary trust responsibilities. Is that you, counties, or Clean Water?
That's a great question. So that would be us, primarily because the East Maui streams, specific to East Maui streams and the diversions on them, the diversions are managed by those East Maui, but they're permitted and regulated by the Water Commission. One of the ways that we manage and balance stream protection, kind of getting to the resolution that you're talking about, is we set what we call in-stream flow standards or interim in-stream flow standards. And what that is it's the minimum, the minimum amount of water that must be in a stream in order to protect in-stream values. And when we say in-stream values, we're talking about water and just being able to flow to the coast. It's for native biota, including like hihivai and opai and oopu that need water and continuous flow in order to survive. It includes endangered species beyond those, native biota, and then even plant life. And it also includes in-stream, like traditional customary practices. So, there may be portions of streams or springs that rely on, for religious purposes or spiritual purposes, people go and hi'uvai in streams, right, to cleanse and and whatnot. People gather vai for ceremony and protocol. And also includes lo'i kalo. So like traditionally in East Maui, a lot of the streams were used for kalo cultivation. So that letter requesting kind of that, and to ensure that water is kind of maintained in those stream systems, would come to the Water Commission and also DLNR in the context of, you know, they manage our Malka watersheds in terms of land management and forest management where it's on state public lands. If it's private lands, obviously it's the private landowner that needs to manage that. But related to forest protection and management, that would be DLNR DOFA. So yes, we would be the one that you probably would direct that resolution to. The way that I look at it is Department of Health, and this is a way that I frame it, is Department of Health is in charge of, in their environmental programs, in charge of federal programs and federal statutes. So there's 2 federal statutes that specifically relate to water managed at the state level. And that's the Clean Water Act. So there's the Clean Water Branch and the Safe Drinking Water Act, or the Safe Drinking Water Branch of the DOH. So those are federal statutes that then are basically delegated to the states to manage and administer. And so the primary kuleana of Safe Water Drinking Act makes sure that nothing's making it into waters of, what is the actual term? Waters of the state. Basically anything that discharges into the ocean or into navigable waters. DOH wants to make sure that there's no contamination, no impacts on quality, all of those things. So they work closely with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. On the Safe Drinking Water Act side, or Safe Drinking Water Branch side, public water system. So they permit, if you're going to use a well, like for example, the Board of Water Supply, they make sure they have to meet all of those Safe Drinking Water Act requirements on related to water quality, distribution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those 2 statutes at the very highest federal level are managed and administered by DOH. We as a state have adopted an additional protection measure or additional agency to take on kuleana over water. And that's more usually allocation and quantity. That's where the Water Commission kind of gets involved. But we do have a kind of a co-trustee relationship with Department of Health. Us on the water quantity side, DOH on the water quality side. But obviously, quantity and quality are connected, right? That if you have plenty of water, but if it's contaminated, then really you can't use it, and vice versa, right? We can have a lot of water. Sorry, I said that already. You might be impacted by water quality as you're doing and looking at allocations. So that was a long-winded answer to your question, but just to provide context, I think that's very helpful. There's a lot of hands that touch water in the state.
And then could you just kind of explain, so you talked about the relationship with Department of Health and then your commission, and then what's the relationship between the commission and then the county level administration?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's great. So way too often everyone assumes, or there's this thought that the departments of water supply, the boards of water supply, basically are the water managers of the state. So they manage as a public utility of the county and the municipalities. They manage water systems and provide water, and that's the primary purpose, right? They are a government entity that provides water resources. They actually are what we call them just purveyors of water. So there's like East Maui purveys surface water. You have other private water companies that purvey groundwater or domestic or drinking water. So they're a user of water and they fall under the Water Commission regulation. So in essence, there's the state and then the county. So the county departments of water supply and the boards of water supply are still subject to the state water code. And if they want to develop a well, they have to get a permit from us. If they wanted to use surface water and treat it for their water system, they would have to get a surface water diversion permit from the Water Commission. So that's our relationship. We are the regulators of the users or the purveyors of water. So the board that's the relationship and the connection between us at the state level and then the counties.
Okay, and I'll also note, going back to that 2018 resolution, we did not transmit it to you, so that's our bad. We will course correct going forward and make sure that our water resolutions in the future go to the right, body. But second question is what are like the big hot issues that are coming before the commission now, like the last couple months or last year or so? Like, what are the big ones?
Yeah, I would say the biggest issues revolve around climate change and some of the climate realities that we're facing. So basically we've managed to develop and build our communities in leeward areas of each island, which is great for weather purposes, but not always for water supply. And so some of the things that we're looking at is, and has come up, is we've had prolonged droughts that we're seeing. And so you're seeing more frequently these water shortage notices on Maui, on Oahu, of conservation requests. But that's just a reality of something that's coming down the line, is we are looking at, more a drier future, at least based on some of the projections. We're going to have rain, but it's going to just be an episodic events. There's heavy rainfall, which causes erosion and runoff. So a lot of the decisions that are coming for the commission are, reactions to some of the kind of not unanticipated things that come from the effects of climate change. So climate change is one. The other is just, the nexus between, the use of water and protection of water related to Native Hawaiians and traditional customary practices. So, the code is about 32 years, 33 years old. It hasn't always been implemented in its totality. And so now we're seeing, we have various court cases and others that are our obligation to protect the public trust, which includes, there's 4 public trust uses of water. It's something to walk away from this conversation knowing. One is the domestic use of water, so your right to use water in your home. 2 is the water for traditional and customary practice of Native Hawaiians. So that's kind of what's coming up more frequently. 3 is water in its natural state. So basically leaving water in streams, leaving water in the aquifer, that's a public trust use of water by just protecting it. And then the 4th is DHHL's reservations of water. And so what we're seeing is while we've kind of become ma'a and we developed these systems and used water, the use of water, for example, pumping of wells, does reduce water that naturally flows to the coast. And that water that used to flow to the coast used to feed oftentimes traditional resources that practitioners gathered, limu, or help to feed the estuaries that then help to feed the fish stock. So we're seeing some of the effects that we're seeing is a reduction in resources that's a result of water use and management. And so we're having to see more of a balancing that the commission has to take on, as it wants to continue to make sure we use water and use it in a reasonable and beneficial way. There's this need to better understand, well, what kind of impacts does that have on a short-term and long-term, so that climate change lens? And then also, what kind of impacts does it have on the other public trust uses of water, including our Native Hawaiian water uses or traditional customary practice of Native Hawaiians? And then the last one I would say is infrastructure, right? That, I think, Dre, you mentioned it, is like somebody that maybe takes advantage of or takes it for granted that water, you can just drink it and not die from it, straight from the tap. We've invested in infrastructure, but maintaining that, building that new infrastructure, building more climate resilient infrastructure is becoming costly, and a lot of the infrastructure is aging out. So you have a lot of need to want to, we're going to have to start to invest in our infrastructure and building it to become more climate resilient. And then also just fixing a lot of the systems. They're just old. So we're seeing a lot of those are the core issues, but then based on that, other smaller issues come up. They pop up here and there. And then another one, maybe the last one that I'd plug is we have to start to look at water more holistically. You know, I think traditionally we did from Mauka to Makai through the Ahupua'a system. Throughout the mainland and in water, the water industry, they've adopted this concept called one water. It's basically all water is water, and we just have to manage it through its entire cycle and system. And so what we're seeing is when there's heavy events, we have stormwater. So stormwater is becoming a huge issue, not only here in Hawaii, but throughout the world. And how we manage that, how we take care of that, not only just to mitigate its impacts on our coastal environment or throughout our communities for flooding and erosion, but also, is there ways that we can use that and reuse that or store it for drier periods of time? Similarly, as it moves through the Ahupua'a and through our communities, there's the opportunity to manage, or we develop a lot of waste, right? So wastewater is another huge issue that's coming up. It's not within our purview, it's within Department of Health, but you know, treating water and reusing water for irrigation, right, or other types of non-potable uses is becoming something that we're going to have to start thinking about. And to be honest, I think it's a lot more right now, based on some of the money and the cost and environmental impacts. It's probably better for us to invest in reuse infrastructure, expanding reuse opportunities, than to shift to desalinization, right? We're surrounded by water in the ocean, but just the cost to desal water, we really haven't developed the technologies yet and the scale to make it reasonable and affordable for us to look at. So those are kind of just off the top of my head, kind of what I work on and what kind of takes up a lot of our time at the Water Commission. It's all about balance, though. That's all I say. Balancing out how we manage water resources, and water resources broadly.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we have about 10 minutes left, and so I just want to see if any of our other members have questions. And if you don't unmute and ask questions, I'm going to call on you to ask questions. Oh, Max, yay, Max always has good questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, Kaleo, you're kind of mentioning about just the aging infrastructure and the things needing repair. I mean, across all the public or private water sources you guys are at the commission are overseeing, I mean, how big of an issue is it today? You know, it's, yeah, I guess, what is the roadmap that you see out of this?
Yeah, I mean, it is big. I think, you know, I'll use an example, and one of the biggest infrastructures that we got is our plantation systems and our irrigation ditches and systems that came over from the plantations. And so, you know, when a lot of times, if you're not going to use it, you kind of just let it fall into disrepair. So now we're looking at, okay, well, in order to repair it and bring it up to like modern, you know, in order to modernize the system, how much is it going to cost? It's going to cost a lot of money. And so, you know, part of the evaluation is like, do we bring it up? Do we fix it? Or do we just like let it go and build a more efficient system that meets our current needs? So that's the same thing for like all of our water systems, including you know, our potable water systems. Is, you know, at what point do you start to look at modernizing and making more efficient infrastructure decisions, and maybe kind of transition away from some of our older systems in order to meet our current and future demands? So in terms of roadmaps, that's why we have the Hawaii Water Plan. It does lay out some of the within reasonable time frame. We use a 20-year time frame, what projects are coming online, where we're going to go, and that's more new projects. For the existing infrastructure and management, is really just continue to coordinate with all the water systems, both public and private, to make sure that they're just at least managing their systems well. And so one of the good things is for larger water systems, the legislature passed, I forget the act, but it requires water audits annually. So we've been working with those private water purveyors to look at their systems, looking at areas where they're maybe losing water, they call it non-revenue water, where there's leaks in systems, if their meters are not functioning correctly, how to fix those, because all of those work against the system and the operations and make it more costly, and you end up, you know, losing more money. So it's a huge task. But I do think there are low-hanging fruit and strategies that can be pursued, and it really just depends on the system, right? And and what capacity they have. I think one of the things that we're trying to the crosswalk is, to what extent does the state get involved to support these private water systems and upgrading their systems with public taxpayer money, because ultimately the private system, it would lend itself to better water resource management and use. If we can not waste water in these private systems, especially these larger irrigation ones, and also provide water for our agricultural uses or for, to grow our own food, is that worth public taxpayer money? And I think, to some extent, yeah, it is, right? We need to think smarter and work together to manage our water resources. I hope that answered your question. If you have any specific system question, I might know, but that's a broader response.
Oh, that was helpful. I mean, just I guess as a follow-up comment, the well that my company owns now in Waialua is an old dole plantation system, and we got our annual water audit letter from the commission, and we're kind of looking around like, oh my gosh, this is we knew we had leaks, but it's a lot bigger issue than we knew going in.
Right. Yeah, and part of that again is you can't manage what you don't know, right? So if we all invest in kind of, one of the things that we've been trying to push, or at least I've been trying to push at the commission, is we need data. We need people, the public, private, we all need to invest in data, because without that data and that information, we can't make informed decisions, or we can make decisions, but they're not as robust and comprehensive and holistic and long-term. So yeah, again, we're here to support. It's great to be a regulator and have that authority and power, but ultimately we want just people to just malama, right? Just take care of and steward our water resources, just be a better steward. And we want to try to provide, options, technical assistance, training, etc., to do that.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. I think maybe Cedric, do you have a question? Or did you just unmute for fun?
No. I just I did have a question. Thanks,
Go
Jay.
ahead.
And Kaleo, you may not be able to answer this right now, but just something to ponder. This is really great information, and I'm wondering how best can we amplify some of the messages that you have, or some of the challenges that you're facing, or how do we stay more informed with the goings on of the commission, and to then, after being informed, share the information wider?
That is spoken really well from a communications person that I know. No, I appreciate that question, and it's something that we haven't. I will say the Water Commission has not done a good job of, right? People don't know who we are. They think, if they just hear, oh, you're the Board of Water Supply. No, we're the Water Commission. Who's that, right? So we could do a better job of explaining who we are, what we do. So that's something that I'm working on, hopefully in this term, to really beef up and get out there. The other thing is, so kahea out to our community is, we have monthly Water Commission meetings. Now that we have them via hybrid, you can just listen to it as background noise on YouTube, just to kind of understand what are the water issues that the commission's talking about and considering throughout the state. We have a water bulletin that we can, if you give us your email, you'll get notice of anytime. Basically, it's a list of all the new well applications throughout the state, where some meetings are happening, where we're looking at setting IFS. Again, we use our website as one of our primary tools for communication. But I think what's great is, and that's why I asked, what's your water story? And it's funny that this group three of you said, I don't have a water story. Is in most of the times when I ask the question, and maybe it's in context of the gatherings that I've been part of, is, there's always somebody with some relationship to water. We all have a relationship to water because we need it to live. But a lot of times people will tell stories about their childhood, or swimming in a stream that they grew up with their family, or going to the beach, or and then there's the other side of that too. And so, which is people tell, I almost drowned, or we all have a relationship with water. And that's my point, is I think how you can amplify it is have and continue to connect to that resource. That's the only way we collectively can do our part in being better stewards, is to know where your water comes from, know the rain names, know the place names, know the stream names of where you live and where you go even, and expand your relationship with Bai. Once you do that, I think you just become more conscious, and then you can engage in these legal or policy or planning conversations with your own relation to that resource. But if you don't just engage and create that relationship, you kind of just, I've noticed there's a difficulty in connecting. And I think that's how you amplify, right? That's how you connect with one another. It's how you connect with community, and let water connect us, not divide us, right? That's an opportunity to do, I think, what you're trying to accomplish, that we all can contribute to without kind of having funding or putting together, a water campaign, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's just my initial response and strategy.
Thank you, Kaleo. I just subscribed to the YouTube channel, so now I get my
Awesome.
listening
Yeah.
for my working. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, so Kaleo, we know you have to go, but thank you so much for joining us. I have some follow-up questions that I will email you about just past resolutions that the association has directed to the the work that you do at Seaworm. And so I'll just follow up with you separately for that. But thank you so much for joining us. I think we all learned a lot. I know I learned quite a bit just, hearing you talk story about the work that you do and the kuleana that the commission has. So thank you so much. We hope to see you at convention in October.
Yay. Yeah, mahalo nui for having me.
Yeah, so with that, we'll let you go to Hula and, do other cultural practices that I know you love doing. And I'll ask everyone else to stay on, and we'll just do some quick wrap-up announcements and stuff. So thank you, Kaleo.
Yeah, mahalo nui. And then again, if there's any specific water questions or things you guys want to talk about, just call or email, and I'd be more than happy to come back and talk story with you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah,
Take
aloha.
care. Aloha.
Thank you.